All right, this is an exciting episode for me. You're like you're one of the few guys that I would interview that would make me a little bit nervous because of your background and experience. Michael Gervais. Am I pronouncing that correctly, Mr. Gervais?
You are.
Dude.
And what a fun compliment in a odd way. So I appreciate you.
You know, and the reason I say that is, you know, I talk a lot about sports psychology, performance psychology, neuroscience, but I've never even gone to school. And, you know, my school was real life, studying violence for decades. And the greatest compliment I get, like when you had me on your show, and also, you know, Andrew Huberman, who's actually a neuroscientist, and what, you know, being able to engage and having people go, wow, that's cool and that's correct. So my discoveries were through intuition and just empirical. I could see people experiencing stuff, and I went, oh, it must be this, without without the need to have it be validated. But I just wanted to start off this show that you know, letting you know that I hold you in such high regard, and some of the stuff, and you know, I've wanted to have you on the show for a long time, and most of my audience, law enforcement, military, first responders, martial artists, of course, because of my background, I don't really have like a general public audience, but I think they need to hear some of the stuff. And I was really excited to hear about your book, which has really sparked the interest. You know, you had a really cool conversation with my good friend, Brian McKenzie. And you said some stuff in that interview that I'd never heard you say, probably because you were interviewing me. So I wanted to like somehow, you know, seduce that out of you, because it was awesome. But Michael, welcome to No Fear.
It's my pleasure to be here with you, and I hold you in equal regard for what you've innovated and created, and how you've been able to translate really accurate frameworks from a psychological as well as a physiological framework into applied practices that allow people to be able to do what they want to do under duress. And so I love these conversations that I get to have with you. So I'm stoked to be here with you. And thank you for all the compliments that you just gave.
Thank you. And thank you. So let's end the show right there, where we just complimented each other. And I said, one more information. I've got this, I don't know, is it weird that you can't look in my eyes? Because I've got this new setup here with the camera over here, and it's high def, and that's why I was delayed. I'm trying to set it up, but it can't go right directly in by the computer yet, because then the computer blocks it. So it's crazy. Is it driving you crazy? Yeah, because I could look at the computer and talk.
No. I'm good with you. Yeah, no.
I don't know where to stand here with this, but anyhow. So why don't you, for people who don't know who you are, and they should, because when Finding Mastery came out, it had such great traction that I shared it with my audience. So everyone should by default kind of know who you are. But what's your elevator speech? What do you do? Who are you?
Oh, cool. Thank you. By trade and training, I am a sport and performance psychologist, and so I'm a licensed psychologist with a specialization in sport and performance. And then if you're to double click on that, I've spent a rich amount of time in consequential environments. So if there was a psychology of high stakes, that's one of the areas of this, what I think of beautiful science, that I squarely sit in. And so if you expand that a little bit, say, okay, so what have you done with, you know, this study of psychology? Well, if you bifurcate my professional life, there's two main ways. One is services. And so the services that I'm providing right now are to the Seattle Seahawks. So I'm up there helping them with not psychological issues. I'm helping them with psychological frameworks. I'm helping them with mental skills training. And then out of that, Coach Carroll, the head coach, and I built a business, and that business is called Compete to Create. And what we did there is we took our insights, his practices on how to build a culture where people literally do their very best work, and then my practices on how to help train the people that wanted to do their best work, how to train their mind. So we took the two approaches, layered them together in this really fantastic working laboratory called the Seattle Seahawks. And then we we archived it. We wrote it down on the back of a napkin, and then we got more formal. We put it onto a deck, and then we got more formal, and we actually operationalized it, and we're selling it to corporations and individuals now for the first time, which is really exciting. So first, we're just an enterprise company, and then we've built a platform so individuals could buy the 8-week online course. And now we've got a book, and it's an Audible original. And so it is exactly what it sounds like. It's all Audible. And we're super excited. It's launching July 9th. And it's the stories meets science meets, hands-on.
What I love, if I can interject here, what I love about it is I've listened to your interview with Pete on your stuff, and he's such like his voice is so rich, and the way he's so animated and so emotional when he talks. You can really and you have the same thing. So the idea that you guys went right to Audible versus reading is I think that's a huge win for listeners, because I would rather listen. For everyone listening to this, you got two of the best coaches in the world. If you were about to get in a fight, whether it was a business fight, because of what's going on right now, if you're about to get in a fight, whether it's like a physical fight, right, and you need some fear management, and you go, Tony, you don't want me to hand you a book right there. You want me to whisper in your ear. You want me to go, listen, you know what to do here. We've gone over this, right? And so this idea of having two of the world's best coaches in your ear, I know you, I just got a copy of it. I haven't had a chance to go into it. I wanted to get you on so fast in time for, I'm going to push this out this week, so it's in time for the launch.
Awesome. Yeah, cool. Thanks, man.
But I wanted to interrupt there and say that was so cool that you didn't go to print, that you went to audio.
There's something so intimate about the audio experience. Like literally, when I listen to audio experiences, whether books or podcasts, I feel like they're with me. And what I would say from, the whisper in your ear thing is so cool. And I would double click on that too and say, when it's audio form, I get to muse in different ways. I get to hear the inflections. I get to hear pauses. I get to, be part of it and build a narrative. And there's something that it's just, the technology is great. And so we're incredibly excited to be able to do it that way. And we've got a PDF for all the practices that we put in there for people to follow along with as well. Did you
guys alternate parts?
Yeah.
Or did you record it together?
Yeah.
Were there any parts where you're in the same room?
Yeah, no, a bunch. There was a really funny part of it where we're in the studio. We spent a lot of time in the studio. And then one session we're in the studio, and Pete's going to laugh when he hears this, but he couldn't stop freaking laughing. When you say something and it sounds ridiculous. For me, every time I say the word orange, I want to chuckle because I know it just is a weird word for me to say. And so he hit a couple of those words, and I mean, I wish I had a camera on that day. We didn't have a camera on, and he was uncontrollable in laughter. But that was we're just banging back and forth about stories and ideas, and the mics were on and we're capturing it. The majority of the book was actually very structured and written. So we make sure we capture the stories in the most accurate way, and then be able to double click on the science. And the whole purpose, our whole aim, is to help people live in the present moment more often, period. That's it.
I think we all hear that stuff, and I wrote something in a recent newsletter that what the hell triggered it? Oh, it was a video from 2007 of me working with about 30 cops behind Carlsbad PD, and it was how to defend against a straight punch, and it's gone viral, and people are commenting on it, and it was obviously obviously 10 years before its time, because it didn't have that type of response back then. But now everyone's going, oh, this is great. I'm going this is quite old, guys, 13 years old. It's the stuff we've been teaching for 30 years. That's what I'm thinking in my head. But I posted it in the newsletter, wrote some stuff about it. And at the end of it, I said, here's an interesting thing, because in my newsletter, I always try to have some sort of emotional life connection, not just about tactics. And I said, an interesting thing, when I came out here in 2007 to do that course, I was staying on the 101 at the Hilton, And I remember driving after class up and down, going to a restaurant, thinking, this is Carlsbad, California, thinking people get to live here? Do they? And it was like, do they realize where they live and how amazing this is? Because I lived in Canada at the time. And so it was interesting. And the whole point of this, and I'll circle back to you with what you just said, is one of my longtime readers who comments frequently, he said, hey, I love the part about, because what I wrote at the end of it was, I remember driving up and down here thinking, do people realize what they've got, that they actually live here? Do they notice it just because they're here? Like, is it just now like, oh, I got to get to work, right? And I said, here's a little known anecdote is 10 years later, I moved 10 miles from that exact location. I'm like 10 minutes from Carlsbad PD. So one of my readers said, hey, do you remember that? And do you live that way? And it was interesting because I've been here for 10 years and there's lots of times I don't live in the moment. And I said to him that gratitude and living in the moment, my answer to him was gratitude and living in the moment is a constant. It's like the captain in the sails. You got to find the wind. You got to remember that. And I'd love you to speak on that a little bit because you said, hey, create, we're going to teach you this formula to live in the moment, but you got to remember, you're big on meditation. I am too. You got to go, no, I'm not going to answer those emails. I'm going to meditate like I told myself to. Is there?
Yeah, you're right on the money. I want to share a fun story, and then I'll get to the science of it. Is that one of my dear friends, Nate Hopgood-Chittick, he's no longer with us. He won a Super Bowl. He played at the highest level, and this is before I was at the Seattle Seahawks. And he moved from he was with a couple different teams. And when we synced up here in California, I showed him where I grew up, and it's right on the beach down here. And he goes, tell me you don't get bored of this. Tell me you look at this sunset every night and you're in awe. And I said, yeah, like I'm actually pretty attuned to it, but thank you, right? Like, thank you for reminding me like that, the very special aspect of the sunset. And so I would say that to your point about gratitude is that sometimes it does take perspective from outside of us to remind us of what is special, because we become accustomed to our everyday experiences. And actually our brain is supposed to do that for survival. It's supposed to take the things that you see on a regular basis and strip them down to the essence and put it down into the non-conscious. And that's the process of heuristics. And that is a survival, safety-based mechanism that our brain is trying to become really efficient. But the problem with this conversation that we're having is that it also strips out beauty and becomes something secondary unless it's a new beauty. And
that's deep, man.
Yeah, it's really deep for a lot of reasons, because we run into those challenges when we're in a long-term relationship. We run into the challenges of beauty, because remember when you first met your wife, like, right. Take your breath away. And then you've seen beauty every day and it changes, it mutates in a way where it's more familiar. And so we're looking for ways to be stimulated by beauty. Oh, hold on a minute. It's right. It's always right around us. Mm-hmm. It's also in us. So the entryway into that is the present moment. Gratitude is one of the practices that will help you be connected to what is happening right now, because gratitude is a present moment embodiment. Now, checking the list, like I'm grateful for my house, I'm grateful for my legs, I'm grateful for that's a check the box thing. Mm-hmm. But to really do gratitude training is to embody it and to feel it. And that's a forcing function for the present moment. So it's a long way of me saying that gratitude is one way to enter into the present moment. But the bigger narrative here is that there's a set of trainings, a set of practices that you do to be more familiar with how to enter into the present moment. The cool thing about it is that it really is a simple decision. But sometimes when we're what do I mean by that? Let me slow down. Is that if right now you made a decision to listen, you're in the present moment. Right. But then your mind will pull you out of it, thinking about stuff coming down the pipe later, or maybe it's something internal that is distracting you, like your left hip, or it's a memory that pops up from the non-conscious about what had happened in the past. And when your mind is distracted, and those distractions can also be external cues in the environment right now, loud shiny bell, whatever, or a threat of somebody coming at you. If your mind is distracted on something that's not relevant to the intention, what you set your mind out to do, then that's noise. And the work is to get back to the signal. So signal to noise ratio is a psychological equation. Those that can be connected to the signal more often are in, the signal is the present moment. That entry point, the present moment, is the entry point into where high performance is expressed, where wisdom is revealed, where all things that are true and good and beautiful and amazing are experienced. And so wherever you're going to enter the conversation about being human, about being great at being you, right? Your potential, if you will, that those are the three common ways that we express it: the spiritual path, the performing path. And so how do you enter the present moment? You have to train your mind to be here, now, independent of distractions. And you know, as well as anyone on this planet, that sometimes the emotional experiences, the internal cues, when we're in a perceived or real danger environment, that part of our brain hijacks everything else and it creates compromises. It doesn't mean that we're not in the present moment, but we might be in the present moment in a state that does not allow us to access our good stuff.
Right.
And let me just double click on that for a moment. What I mean by that is that, you know, in our world, we talk about choking. No athlete has ever choked on the field. And that's because they don't eat when they're playing. So it's a bad joke. But what does that mean though? Yeah, but what does that mean is that we're choking off access. So the undisciplined, untrained mind chokes off access to the expression.
Reframe, by the way, because we, you know, I'm 60 years old. I've been using since I'm 11 years old as an athlete. Heard the term choke, don't choke, and no one's ever explained you're choking off access. You're cutting. It's like stepping on your hose, and you can't figure out why the water's not running.
That's exactly right. And what I love about like our conversations is you help people manage the internal state, and then so that they can access their tools. And at some level, we can also go to a place like, if you do enough discovery work and mental skills training work, it's possible to dissolve pressure. So if you think about choking at the kind of the thing that we don't ever want to really experience, especially if it's life-threatening or potential threatening. So choking, micro-choking, performing, thriving under pressure, performing under pressure, thriving under pressure, and then above that is dissolving pressure, which is possible. It is possible to do. It requires discovery. It requires reframing. It requires a real commitment, authentic commitment to get to the truth of shit. And if you can't get into that place, you will constantly be at the whip's end of the environment, feeling pressure and stress. And then what happens is that particular parts of our brain that are responsible for mitigating or managing stress take over. Because if oversimplified analogy between brain and mind is the brain is the hardware, the mind is the software. Way too simple for it to ever hold up. But if you don't have a really strong software, the fucking brain is going to win. It's going to win. The dictum to survive. Yeah, the brain is going to win. Now, how do you need some psychological tools to be able to run that software without patches and bugs?
What do you say? What do you say to the tactical athlete, the athlete? There are a lot of people who are addicted to the pressure, or they have an erroneous belief. I need to be this scared, or I need to have this risk to perform. I tell this story of over the years, I interviewed so many fighters and victims of violence. And I don't remember if I mentioned this to on your podcast, my conversation with Maurice Smith about his pre-fight ritual. And Maurice, I don't know if you know Maurice.
Another name.
But, UFC champ, K1 champ, professional Thai boxer, one of the best in the world, obviously at the height of his career. And so one of the things that I used to do that was super fun is I would interview fighters. And I'd talk to them about stuff, because the way I would coach people was intuitive. And I remember saying to Maurice, can I ask you a question? I go, like, your pre-fight ritual, what is it? And he's there with, the equivalent of, what are some great headphones, I forget the stuff you see at, whatever the noise canceling, Beats.
Over the years stuff.
Yeah. But whatever Beats was back 20 years ago when I talked to him, and he said, he's like listening to Beats, like Rhythm of Blue on a massage table, just like lying back doing this. And in this room are 6 other fighters. One fighter, it's his first fight. One fighter's his 10th fight. One fighter's his 15th fight, but he knows he's going to get cut if he doesn't, win this fight. And I described this scenario where, there's Maurice going, and his eyes closed and he's on a massage table, like lying on his back. He's not getting massaged, just lying down. And then there's somebody else in there, Michael, who's like walking around like this, right? He's pacing. Then there's the other guy. You've seen all the athletes, the foot going 100 miles an hour. This lady sitting on the bench and the foot's bouncing like he's sewing, like a sewing machine. And then there's another guy, like head bouncing against the walker banks, ding, ding. Another guy smacking his face, walking around. And when I do my coach's clinic, I say to them, and you're going to love this. I go, so I asked Maurice, Maurice, talk to me about fear before a fight. What's going through your mind? How are you managing the fear? And he looks at me, goes, let me ask you a question. I'm like, okay. He goes, do you have a job? I go, yeah, of course I do. He goes, are you afraid to go to work? I go, no. He goes, me either. Headphones back on. So I immediately thought of him in that story when you said the people that can dissolve pressure. This is my job. I'm really good. I'm going to work. So the question is full circle, because I know that I don't know how many people listen to my show because I never look at analytics. I do this as a labor of love and to share. There are going to be a bazillion people, I don't have that many followers, but there's going to be, let's say, 3 followers out there who go, you know what? I need to be scared to do this. I need to feel this risk. So what are you, when you meet an athlete like that?
Yeah, for sure.
You know where I'm going with this? The person that has that belief that their best self, go for it.
Yeah, I think that they're probably right. I'll explain it from a scientific framework, and then let me just start with the story. Is that I don't know if I told you, but I cornered 3 fights in the UFC.
No.
As the mental skills, as the sports psych.
Who are the fighters? Maybe
let me keep them anonymous because it's unbecoming,
Okay.
But you can, if you watch early days in the UFC,
okay,
you'll see me in the corner. It's all public, but I just don't like to talk about that.
Yeah, go for it.
So, and I've also cornered heavyweight boxing fights as well. And so I know exactly what you're talking about. You described it beautifully. And what's happening pre-fight, we're talking about pre-performance routines, and then let's get to the risk, the kind of fear thing in a moment, is that pre-performance routines are substandard. There's a place for them, but a pre-performance routine, like, what do I say to myself when I put in my mouthpiece? What do I say to myself as I'm getting taped? What do I say to myself as I grab my ropes? Or, before, when I enter the threshold of the arena and I feel the concrete and then the cheer or not cheer of the fans.
Right.
All of that's really good as a scientific approach to putting your mind in a particular state. Now, what does that mean? A pre-performance routine is exactly that. When I put in my mouthpiece and I say to myself, bite down, let's go, or I put on my headgear and I say, let it flow, whatever it might be, it's putting myself into a particular state. Now, each athlete, each performer, tactical athlete or not, there is an ideal state for walking up on a car. There's an ideal state for walking into a cage. There's an ideal state for greeting somebody, in a park. And so part of mastery is understanding how to attune to your ideal state. Mm-hmm. First order of business, write that down. What is my ideal blank state? Ideal competitive state, ideal combat state, ideal friendliness. Like, what is my ideal state? And as consistent as you can be on attuning yourself to that state, then you'll have a way to be able to access a higher version of yourself, a widening of the access, if you will, as opposed to a constricting choking. Okay, so for people to go into that very special place that we're talking about, where they're saying, I need fear, they're close to being right. I need to be afraid or whatever. They're close to being right. when there is
Or
perceived
let's substitute fear for pressure. I want to feel that pressure.
okay, so when it's that's where I was going. When there's perceived or real risk in an environment, there is a forcing function, a experience that happens in our brain to be able to lock in at a deeper level, and our senses are heightened as our heart rate goes up, and this whole cascade of fight, flight, freeze, submit, and flow. So we don't talk about submit and flow enough. Fight, flight, freeze, submit, and flow.
Mm.
And so what's the difference between fight, flight, and flow? It's a very thin space. And the difference between it when we're heightened in that way is, do we like this? Does it feel good? Do we appreciate, and do we have ways to modulate or manage that sensation of that internal activation? Because if you don't like it, it's scratchy as hell. Mm-hmm. It is, it's agitating. And if you like it, you can feel your heart thump. You feel all that heightened awareness. You go, yeah, this is what I'm built for. Let's go. So part of that is the narrative. And there's a whole neurochemical and electrical signature that we can see when people are in that ideal state. But part of that ideal state is knowing what it is. What is my ideal state? Having practices that help you get to that ideal state more often. And when you're in it, loving it. Now, what spills the cup over, if you will? When you don't know how to manage it, or it's caught you off guard that you don't think you can be in it, or you're unpracticed in it. Those are the three big ones. So one of the geniuses of your program is that you take people to a heightened state so they can appreciate it. Now, nothing is quite like a knife, a real knife, with bad intentions and the potential that, you could be hurt. But you know what? That silver shiny thing or that black shiny thing can get people pretty close to it when somebody is acting with bad intention.
And it's a choiceless choice, as I teach people. Like, you can't, there's like zero practicality to going out and trying to get into multiple real knife fights so that you can stress inoculate just in case there is a further real knife fight. It's just a silly thing. And at the end of the day, for go off on a mini self-defense tangent here, is what I've discovered over 40 years studying violence, fear, and aggression, is that people who manage their fear manage to fight. It doesn't ensure victory, but if the fight's going to happen anyhow, you need to manage your fear. And that is I would never use, in my domain, I would never use the word flow state, but that's what it is. It's just accepting where you are and be that Zen samurai who goes, look, if I win, that's cool. If I lose, that's cool. I'm just going to be in the moment. Easier said than done when it's not your life that you train for. But when I'm training good Samaritans who just want to get home to their family, that's the biggest thing is you got to respect your physiology, understand your human weapon system, and you got to manage fear. And the single trickiest thing to teach people is that fear. But anyways, I don't want to talk about self-defense. I do want to go back to something that you said about the individual. And listen, everyone listening to this, you don't need to be a professional athlete. If we use the term performance psychology for you as an athlete, every human by default who moves about the planet, you're an athlete, right? It's like if I say, hey, get off the couch, put back the ice cream, go get some fruit and go for a walk. Like, you got to be an athlete to do that. And I'm being very generous, but I'm trying to be spiritual.
It's actually how Nike describes their talent pool or their customer pool. Is that, they're for athletes, and they've got a nice little tagline inside of the walls of that building. And then there's an asterisk next to the word athlete. And the first time I saw it, I was like, what's up with the asterisk? And they said, oh, if you have a body, you're an athlete.
Nice.
So, yeah. So in other words, Nike and you have that same insight is that, yeah. And so there's no reason why your carriage, your body, is meant to do anything other than move well. And so the inputs that you put on it, you don't need to be the fastest person on the planet. That's the job for a handful of people.
Right.
But how you treat your body it's designed. The brain's dictum, if you will, is to manipulate, move, or in the environment for survival. And then the second dictum is to make sense of the world. for survival. And so the survival thing means that you got to be able to move.
That's so amazing. When I'm talking to people and I'm trying to explain to them like that everything in our life runs through this. You use the term non-conscious. Is that deliberate instead of sub or unconscious? What's the difference between? Because I liked it.
Yeah, I think that unconscious is tagged to this thing that we're not, we didn't program.
Okay.
You know, and then subconscious is as if it is substandard too. But non-conscious to me just means I'm not fully aware of it until it becomes conscious. And the non-conscious, there's many philosophical points of view here, but the non-conscious for me are things that I have coded in a way that I no longer need to attend to the details of.
So stuff you trained and now you're, so like you know, somebody doing a really skilled police officer doing a magazine change or clearing a jam and they don't even remember doing it. And
that's exactly right. You know, and that's actually part and parcel right now. The narrative in America is non-conscious biases, you know, things that we're not aware of and the frames that we're using to interpret the world around us. I love that
distinction, man. I'm glad I asked because I talk a lot about the unconscious bias. But if a bias is learned, it's not unconscious, it's non-conscious.
Well, I think that in the field though, unconscious and non-conscious, we're saying the same thing. Yeah. I just like I like the non a bit better than
I love, you know, whenever somebody says to me or have a discussion, they go, well, that's just semantics. What I say to them in my head is I go, semantics means you disagree and you don't want to talk about it more. It's like the specificity with which you define something determines its usefulness to you.
Oh, for sure. Right? Language matters. Yeah, language like
you just froze.
Hang
on a second.
Language. Hold on.
Yeah, you just froze. You're back.
Okay, hold on. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I got you. Are you frozen?
Yeah, no, I'm okay. Yeah, so the precision of language is really important.
It's everything, and you know we're talking with Mike, who's a world-class coach, but if you can't afford Mike or his book, or you've learned it and now you've internalized it and you got a new narrative to take you through life, who is your coach? So I always talk about self-coaching. I'm not going to be there in the fight. You can look around, or you can take your eyes off the ball or the bad guy. If you look around, for me, you got to be able to self-coach. You got to be able to, you know, so I wanted to come back to something we talked about 10, 15 minutes ago.
Wait, hold on, Tony, can I hit this part? Because I think it's super important. What you just said is critical, which is you are your most significant coach. And the talent level of the way you coach for most people is pretty substandard. Like we say things, the untrained say things to themselves like you suck. The trained, we don't say that shit. Why? We say things to ourselves that are building as opposed to tearing down. Because if I told you, Tony, if I said to you, sorry to interrupt you, if I told you, if I said, Tony, you know what? Man, you're too freaking slow. Your shit's getting whacked. It's a little old now. You know, like I think you lost a step. Man, people are going to find out. Watch, people are going to find out. That's the shit that you might say to yourself if you're untrained.
Right.
If I said that to you, you'd be like, screw you, dude. Like, you ain't, like, bail.
Or
like,
worse, I believe it and I start internalizing it. It'd be one thing if I got defensive or defiant and then backed off and, you know, but it's interesting because you reminded me of a while back, like 20 years ago, I took up golf for a minute and realized that my scar tissue and my body type and in my internal rotation from decades of striking, that golf wasn't going to be my sport. And I could actually, I remember once taking my daughter to the course and being here and, you know, I'm fancying myself like a really coordinated athlete. So I'm like in position, do it. And the ball goes, you know, and I'm like, I'm alone. I'm like, shit. And I whip the club. And my daughter, Maddie at the time, she was maybe 10 or 11. She goes, Dad, that's good. The club went further than the ball. That's good, Dad. And I'm like, oh, no, don't say that to me. But when I get into something, I go all in. I get books, I get videos. If I'm going to suck, I want to suck because I'm just not good, not because I didn't understand what I was supposed to understand. But I remember reading one book, and I don't know if it was Jim Flick or one of the great coaches, and he was coaching a pro. I want your thoughts on this, because I think you were making a philosophical point, like the recreational athlete will go, man, you suck, but the pro never would. My contention is that you've probably trained through your guidance with Pete, those great athletes never to talk that way. But this true story in this golf book was, I forget who it was now, he shanks the ball and he slams the club down. He goes, fuck, you suck, man. God damn it. God, you're shit. And coach comes up to him. He says, it's obviously close to him. He knows he has family. He goes, hey, how's your son doing? So, he's great. Why? Thanks for asking. Hey, if I coached him golf and he shanked a shot and you were watching as his dad, and I looked at him and I said, you suck, that was shit, what would you say? He goes, I'd fire you. I wouldn't let you talk to my son that way. He goes, well, why are you talking yourself that way? I remember, I get goosebumps again just thinking about that. Because I know you're right, but I grew up in the 60s, and it was a generation where you got shit for everything. It was, everyone gets a trophy now, and nobody gets smacked on their ass, right? I could, if I stopped the recording, and tell you some of the things that used to happen in the 60s, but I've changed how I talk to myself because I understand. But I got to share this one story, and then please, I want your guidance and insight on this, both for me and for everyone listening, because a lot of the martial artists and a lot of the, I know, cops and military and firefighters and people that listen to my show, we do that. We're hard on ourselves, and I remember it was mid '80s. And I gave the class something to do. There were about 9 people, and they're all hitting the bags, ding, 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 they're nailing the bags. And I'm watching them, proud. And I walk into my office to go do some stuff, gave them like 3 rounds to do. And when I wasn't there, they was like, oh, Tony's not here. Hey, man. They start kind of talking and goofing off. And I walk out, and I'm like this. And I'm like, and there were 2 guys there, Mike, that were new. They were trying the class. They were friends of 2 of the students. And I walk up and I go, what the fuck are you doing? I gave you 3 rounds. Like, do you think if you're in the street and you get in a fight with a guy and you're not in shape, that he's going to back off? He's going to eat you up. What the fuck is going on here? Come on, you guys, this is a street defense school. Seriously, man, listen, if you train like this, I'm going to bet on the bad guy. And I turn around and I storm out. Well, I could hear the bags. Guys start nailing it. And then the next week, students come back and I go, hey, what'd you 2 friends think of the class? And they kind of went, they thought, no, come on, tell me what happened there. They didn't like it? Because I don't notice that I'm talking that way. I don't do that anymore, but I didn't notice it then. That was just my culture. And guy says, well, I don't mean to disrespect you, but they both thought you were an asshole. And I'm like, what? I'm trying to save his life. Like, didn't even get it, right? But what I realized is that if you got 10 athletes in front of you, or 10 good humans in front of you, if you're belittling and berating, that only the people that had emotional abuse like you did growing up will go, okay, let's train. Everyone else will go, what the fuck? But regardless of anyone's upbringing, if there's positivity and encouragement and some intentionality to it, they'll all pick up their game.
Yeah, so you're picking up on a complicated psychological structure, right? Which is one, it's called the Hawthorne Effect. What you just described is that people act differently when you watch them.
Right.
And so
what they're called again?
Hawthorne.
Hawthorne. Okay, got it.
Hawthorne Effect. And so that's the Hawthorne effect in full play, which is that people perform better, do better when they're being observed.
Mm.
Now, this idea that you maybe spoke to them in ways that were unbecoming, what you were doing is creating a standard. So standards are really important. If you're in a high performing environment, and your environment can be is training for a potential violent or consequential environment, that we need to get as close as we can, as often as we can, to lifelike experiences.
Mm-hmm.
So you're holding a standard of that intensity. And what I've observed from great coaches is that if there's positive, negative, and neutral, that, and let me not use the word neutral, let me use the word task specific, that great coaches create an environment that the person matters. Then they spend most of their time on the task, like very specific task-based things. They are not rah, rah, here we go, let's go. Oh gosh, are you feeling good?
Right.
Right? The positive nature is creating an environment where the person matters. Then the second double click is it gives them now the ability to have high standards and articulate clearly about the task. So if I were to reframe anything that you did, the only thing that you missed was they didn't know if you cared about them or not. Beautiful. So they just got the standard with a little bit of barbed wire in it. And, but you didn't go to the negative side, which is right. Like, listen, unless you're just leaving that out right now, which is like, you POS, get out of my gym. You are worthless. You're right. If you went to that place, then they should leave. But if right. You held a standard and you got to it first, which is like, hey, listen, here's how I'm going to coach you. You come into this gym, I'm going to know you, and you're going to know yourself better than you've ever imagined. And you matter because you breathe. You matter because we're going to try to do something together. And as long as we don't shit on each other and we don't talk bad about each other in negative ways behind each other or to each other, that we can regard each other, then what I'm going to say to you is that this is going to be a place that's going to have incredibly high standards, and it's going to pull the best out of you, and it might not be for you. And that's okay too. When you leave, I'll still love you.
Nice.
Yeah. So positive, negative, and task sometimes get a bad rap. And so Seattle Seahawks, we're built on optimism, and people think that we're built on positivity. That's wrong. We're built on the psychological framework of optimism, which is the fundamental belief, and you're not born this way, beliefs you have to develop, the fundamental belief that the future is going to work out. We're also built on what we call a relationship-based organization. So a relationship-based organization is that the person matters more than the task, and we're agreeing to share the task at the highest standard. So relationship-based is really important because the extraordinary is too freaking big and difficult for anyone to think that they can audaciously do it on their own. We need each other. So if that's the case, then let's invest in each other. And because what I've seen all too often preseason is we kumbaya, shared vision, shared mission. We're going to kick ass this year. That's right. Lock arms. Let's go, brothers. And then as soon as like some stuff happens in the environment, people start to save their own ass and unlock their arms. It's whack. And so how do you get ahead of it? You got to know each other. You got to look each other in the eye. You got to understand where they're coming from. And then a relentless high standard to let go of the things that once were distractions and do the small thing right more often. But to do that, we need an incredible skill of focus. We also need to believe that the future is going to work out, which is the skill of optimism. It's a skill that when you train a skill over and over again, it can become habitual, and it can also become part of a belief system. But most people that are pessimistic or cynical are protecting themselves. They're afraid. And if you're a pessimistic or cynic, I'm sorry, that's okay. And I just know what the operating system is, that you're trying to save yourself or protect yourself from being vulnerable, from giving yourself into a difficult situation. So pessimists have earned it. They've been burned, or they were raised by people that were burned. Cynics, same thing. And there's no such thing as like option 3. There's pessimism or optimism. So it's the way that you think about your future. Is it going to work out or not?
That's so heavy and deep, man. how do you, you know, when someone comes to me and I've had more students than I care to admit who get through the training. And by the way, I intuitively do a little bit. I made some good notes. You know what you do. My students know that I really care about them. In that particular case, because it was a couple of guys trying out a class,
They didn't know yet.
they
They
didn't
didn't
get to
know
know
yet.
me, so they
Yeah.
got the okay, this is gonna suck. Um, but I have evolved in that methodology, you know.
But just for a note on that, Tony, is that if you cross the line of regard, you're wrong. But if you hold the standard and you have some scratchiness to it, it's not wrong.
Right.
But the reason that we lose people is because we publicly embarrass them. And we believe, this is Coach and I, we believe that we've got a handful of seconds after a mistake is made or something substandard to potential.
Mm-hmm.
We believe we got just 1, 2, 3, maybe 3 seconds where we can make or break a relationship. You publicly roll your eyes and embarrass another human, it takes an incredible amount of time to build that back. And so standards are different. You can be frustrated, you know, but you can't publicly embarrass people. It's too hard. It takes too long to get back. And by the
Right.
way, you know, because you're sophisticated, that's not going to help performance. It
Right.
might shift a physiological state, but rarely have I ever seen somebody get better because of it. That's bad psychology. It's bad.
That's great.
Yeah.
I love that just that line. Rarely have you seen anyone get better because of that.
Yeah.
So let me ask you this: so many people who come to train with us have had either sexual assault, a violent attack, they're been consuming negative, violent news. So they are, through osmosis, in the category you described of the cynic or the pessimist. There's something in their life that has been toxic and contaminating them. And and so a lot of them, like I'll show them, I'll like be doing my best shit. I'll be juggling, pulling rabbits, you know, out of hats, you know, saving babies. And someone will go through the course and there, you know, one story that always jumped out where this guy at the end of this exercise, where everyone in the class is like, whoa, that was amazing. I can't believe I just learned that so quickly. Thank you. This guy goes, you know, that was really interesting, but I'm thinking if that actually happened to me, like this weekend, I'm going to freeze and I'm just going to, I'm not going to be able to pull this off. And I looked at him and I said, sir, do you realize that you're arguing to be right about failing? Right? Like I need you to stop here. You're arguing to be right about, how do you, with all of the tools and skills and insights and research you've done, because the cynic pessimist, some of those guys are really good athletes that have made it to your camps. And I talk about this when I'm doing program management for military and law enforcement or higher level, where I go, you might have somebody that's a huge asset, but they've got this one little issue. How do you mentor them through that?
It's really good. So FWD, you know, short for what the fuck we doing? You know, like, so FWD is what you do, right? And it's at some point, like to your point, like you're arguing to be a failure. Okay, FWD. And so, so we have to come at it from a different perspective first, as we introduce what optimism and pessimism are. We just introduce it first. And then we say, listen, when you think about world-class, world best, world leaders, I'd be hard pressed to find one of the best in the world that doesn't believe it's going to work out for them. Why is that? Why is that? And if that doesn't cost anything, why not build that inside of you as well? And so we say that optimism is at the center of mental toughness. So mental toughness is doing the difficult thing and staying in the difficult thing. That's mental toughness. Being flexible, you know, to be able to be inside the difficult thing. And optimism is the belief that it's going to work out. So I'll do the difficult, I'll stay in the difficult thing. And then we've also got to double click on confidence. So if you don't believe that you've got the skills to manage something like the gentleman that you're talking about, well, that's actually a confidence thing mixed with a pessimism thing. So I don't think, like, if in reality, I'm not going to be able to make this happen. Well, okay, is that a psychological framework that you're working from because you don't have confidence? I'll explain how to build confidence in a moment. Or is that because you don't have the
Dude,
actual
I gotta
tools?
interrupt you and tell you I fucking love this. I don't usually make notes when I'm interviewing people because I make my notes what my questions are, but this stuff is so up my alley, and just this idea that you can have I always tell people, if you have no awareness, you have no chance, right? And then I tell
Yes.
them, if you have no self-awareness, you have no situational awareness. But
Great.
what I love here, Mike, and I want you to go back to what you're saying, is I never thought about this, like, write down that there are people that develop tremendous skill and then they freeze in front of Tyson at his prime, or they choke in their event. And that's because they were feeding or marinating in pessimism or cynicism. You can have all the skill in the world, but if you don't believe you're going to win, wow.
Yeah. And well, you're going to find evidence too. Yeah, no, you're on the money, because that's part two of kind of how our brain is designed, is that it's designed to be a meaning making machine. So it's trying to make meaning and make sense of things. And so what you say to yourself is really important now. And if I make psychology as simple as I can, which it's a beautiful science, like it really is complicated and beautiful. It's the frontier right now of human performance.
Sure.
Before we get to genetic recoding, right now, psychology is the frontier. And what's challenging about psychology is it's invisible. We can't see psychology. We can't see thoughts. No different than we can't see gravity. But just like gravity, just like thoughts, we can see the artifact of gravity.
Beautiful.
We can also see the artifact of thought, which is constriction, negative, toxic, unproductive, matching psychology is a constricted human. Pessimism,
the gravity
fits on that.
if I can throw a little poetic license here, the gravity of shitty thoughts.
That's good mix in there.
Right,
yes,
right.
That's
for
exactly
your bad joke earlier on. I just thought I'd throw that in.
Yeah, no, we can commiserate together. And so people that have been traumatized, it's not really, I'm a psychologist, so I'm saying this with the highest regard for people that have had something happen to them. It's not so much the physical event. That's not what it is. It's the psychological leave behind, the terror that is left. It is the haunting of memories. It's the post-traumatic stress disorder is not actually the right capture of what happens for people that have been traumatized. It's not a post-traumatic stress. It's actually a avoidance of re-traumatization. So it's like, if you've gone through something really heavy, whether it's sexual abuse or it is,
I hope that it doesn't happen again. And I'm just visualizing.
Yeah, so it's an active organizing of one's life to not be re-traumatized. So as soon as I see a 6'2" bearded man, say that was how trauma happened, everything bang happens inside of me. So it's not post-trauma; it's actually an active avoidance or attempt to manage what could be a re-traumatization. Okay. So let's go back into this now, is that if I was to oversimplify this beautiful science, that there are two main categories: self-discovery and skills, mental skills. It's one of those two camps that the field of psychology falls in. And the bright line between both of them is mindfulness. Mindfulness is the practice of becoming more aware so you can go deeper in your discovery processes. Because I'll tell you what, if you don't have the internal stuff to get to the truth, it's a hard life, dude. It's a freaking hard life.
Dude,
you need some internal fortitude and some inner courage to go get to the truth of things. And the beauty about that is that once you know who you are, nobody can ever take that away from you. But you got to first know who you are and be committed to be on that path. The goal is the path.
Beautiful.
And the path of discovery. And then the second part of it are the freaking mental tools so you can be about it. You can be that man or woman that you know is inside of you. And here's the whole premise of our book. Here's the whole premise of our course, is that everything you need is already inside you. Everything you need, it's already in there. You don't need something external to make you. But
So
we're going to
neat
give you
is
the
like,
tools.
know thyself and you're complete already. We hear these, memes and fortune cookies all the time. But what I love about this conversation, Michael, is not just hearing it in your voice, but you're explaining stuff that in when we do our train the trainer stuff, we talk about subject matter experts, and then we talk about substance matters experts. And you're sharing substance today, man.
Yeah, that's what's up, dude. And I want to share this with you too, Tony, is that one, thank you for letting me riff and run. And
No,
I
it's
want to make
great.
sure that we give some concrete things to folks as well. Like we put some handles on psychology, if
Mm-hmm.
you will. So maybe it's confidence, maybe it's mindfulness. You pick maybe it's being calm, whatever you want to kind of play with. I'd like to put handles on it. But I also want to mention that we are so appreciative, Coach Carroll and I, we're so appreciative of first responders, of folks that have dedicated their life to going into potentially dangerous environments for the rest of our safeties, whether they're coppers, whether they're first line of anything, or whether they're military personnel, even special operators, that we designed a special course. We took our 8-week course and we partnered with some special operators, and then we created quote unquote Warrior's Edge. It is absolutely free for anybody that's frontline right now in 2020
Wow.
to go spend some time to investigate the inner skills to deal with something that when we started this, we couldn't have predicted how hard it would be for frontliners right now. And so we get into everything from recovery mechanisms to actually recover after, a brutal day, and also all the inner discovery and mental skill work to work well inside of hostile environments. Absolutely free, no questions asked. It's called Warrior's Edge. And
How do they find it? I mean, I'll post the link in the thing, but is it just Google that, or it's on your Find
yeah,
Me?
so no, if you go to competetocreate.net, and you'll find it. It's Warrior's Edge. But if you did Warrior's Edge, Michael Gervais, or Warrior's Edge, Pete Carroll, you'd find that as well.
Awesome. That is fantastic, man.
Yeah.
Hey, I want to be respectful of your time. And you and I will have many more talks like this, because this is just too much fun. Talk to me a little bit about, you've eloquently and elegantly explained psychology like I've never heard anyone talk about it before. I think there's a lot of people on this listening to this call that if I just said, hey, I got a friend of mine who's a psychologist on, like, psychologist,
okay.
right?
Yeah.
But you're cool and you explain it in a way that's fun. And you've done some like some of the stuff, some of the athletes you've worked with. I forget the guy's name that jumped from outer space.
Felix Baumgartner, Red Bull Stratos was that project where he jumped from 130,000 feet.
130,000 feet. I'm like, if you had me jump like from our 30, there's a rock in Hawaii at Waimea Bay. There's a rock that's like 30, 40 feet off there. My daughter wanted to jump off of it. And I said, yeah, because from the beach, it just looks like, and I see all these locals jumping off of it, and you climb up there and 30 feet, looking down, and suddenly I felt like it was 100 feet up, and I'm getting vertigo, and I'm like, I don't like heights anyhow. And she got scared, Mike, and she goes, Dad, I'm scared. And I'm thinking, yes, thank goodness, because I didn't want to jump. I go, let's go back down. She goes, no, I've got to overcome my fear, right, Dad? You always talk about that. And I'm like, no, don't listen to me. And she ends up, it took her like a half an hour. She was crying, but she got her shit together, and she jumps. And I'm so proud of her. I'm like, fuck yeah. And then all of a sudden I realized, oh no. Then it's like, Dad, come on. It was fun. So I had to jump. And that was 30 feet. So what was for, just spend a minute on this 130,000 foot. That's insane.
Yeah, it's actually remarkable. I get a lot of people want to ask the question, like, is he crazy? And no, his craft is flying, without apparatus, really. And just like the greatest mathematicians of the world or historians of the world that want to add and push the front, want to add to their craft, their body of knowledge, and push the frontier of their field. His just happens to be physically consequential. Because if you make a mistake up there, there's 5 really dangerous points of this event. And if he makes a mistake in any of those 5, it's likely to be catastrophic for him. And even some of the brightest minds in aerospace were not sure if he was going to make it through the double sonic boom, because he was going to travel the speed of sound. And so it's a transonic experience, because there's going to be some drag on his arms and his legs and his hands while his head and torso are doing, the sonic boom, or the speed of sound. So the stakes were incredibly high. It was not a notch on the belt type of thing. There was real investigation and deep interest from aerospace. If we're trying to get off this planet and we had to eject at 130,000 feet, is it survivable? And so we found that it is. And the reason they brought me in, and this is kind of classic of where psychology was and what this project has helped us become, is they were, let's go XX millions of dollars invested in this project. 4 years in, they had some of the brightest minds in aerospace. They had the greatest technologists. They had strength and physical coaches, that were on point. And at one point, the athlete Felix, and this is all public, it's in his book and well documented. He says, "Hey, Mike," no, I'm sorry, I wasn't working with the project. He says to Red Bull team, he says, "I'm terrified, I can't do it." So they tried to patch up a scenario, more physical training, get your heart rate better, da, 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 da. And so he finally raised his hands. He said, no, you don't understand. I'm terrified. So I got a call. And so they called me in, and we just applied good science, really good science. And within 3 days, we worked on not managing fear, but extinguishing fear, a very narrow band of fear. And we extinguished that fear. Wow. And it was remarkable work. And he is extraordinary in every way. And he ended up extinguishing the fear and doing something that is for sure never been done before, and it's amazing. So it changed our understanding of human potential.
That's insane. That's amazing. Next time we get together, I gotta get more detail on that, because that's shit that fascinates me. The whole talk today, our talk has been about, this mindfulness in the internal narrative, our self-talk, and finding that balance between, going after this optimism and respecting your skill development. And obviously you explain in the book different strategies to do that. I've been telling, since I got injured 3 years ago with the neck injury that impacted the facial nerve and all of that stuff, and it put pressure on my vagus nerve. So I was suddenly, like, spontaneously, I'd be feeling good, and then all of a sudden I feel this rush of anxiety come on, and then my neck would slip a little bit, and what really saved me, and I use the word saved me, was intentional deliberate breathing, multiple types, and meditating, even 10 minutes, and as long as I could go. And I know you're big on both of those. How much of that, like, is that the baseline? Because you said it way earlier when we first started, like, when you're giving an example, like, hey, if you just wanted to listen to me right now, but then your hip starts to bother you and you start doing this, or your phone starts to light up, and, like, meditation can help that singular focus, because that's always returning to center is one of the goals. So talk a little bit about that, please.
Sure. Mindfulness is really the practice of refocusing. And so it forces awareness enhancing, and it's the mechanical practice of refocusing back to the task at hand, whether that's an inhale and exhale, or contemplating, a thought stem or a question. And so there's 2 basic types of mindfulness. There's single point focus, and there's contemplative. And let's just talk about single point for a moment. If we're going to talk about the single point being an inhale, then an exhale, is that when your mind wanders and it starts thinking about stuff or feeling some internal sensation, is that you go, oh, I see you. And then you just simply come back. So if you're just going to set your clock, I think you said 10 minutes, like you might start over 1,000 times, right? It's like, and that's the practice.
Right.
And so the moment that you're distracted is actually a necessary condition for enhancing awareness.
Mm-hmm.
You're aware that you're distracted. You're aware that you're not in the present. You can't
train it if you don't have that moment.
That's right. And so it is a bit of a mini little celebration, like, oh, look, good, I caught myself. Look at that. Great. Now, what do I do?
It's so funny. I got to interrupt, man, because like I've listened and read so much shit. Nobody says it as clear as you. It's like, they'll say things like, and if you lose focus, start over. Well, you left out, that was that was you forgot to build the trust part and the fact that you're an authority on it. So that was great the way you explained that.
And then Tony, you got a unique way that you speak to yourself. Okay. Let's do something let's not be so constrained in the way that we're talking that everything is flowery and positive. You might say, when you're distracted, you might say, all right, motherfucker, back in it. Let's go. Great. Now, if that MFer is like endearing and loving and it doesn't constrict you and create tension, great. But be about it, like your authentic narrative. And the way to think about, is my narrative helping or is it making things worse? Like, I'm not quite sure how I'm supposed to think. Does it create constriction or does it create space? Do your thoughts create constriction, anger, frustration, worry, anxiousness, intolerability, or do they create space? Like, yeah, motherfucker, let's go. Like I grew up like you. I grew up well before I got a degree in sports psychology in rugged environments where like I had to figure stuff out. And I'm super concerned right now about us losing our way of what makes us special. And so we need to speak to ourselves in ways that have high regard, self and others, and then is real. Because this idea of something foreign trying to adopt it, it's not right. But I will say this to you, is that there is more inside of every human that I've met. There is more inside of me. And I'm fundamentally organizing my life to figure that out and to be able to express it on demand, in command, in rugged environments. Because I know, just like Karch Karai, one of the greatest ever to play the game of volleyball, beach, indoor, gold medalists on both, amazing athlete, says to me, nobody wins a gold medal without staring down a double barrel shotgun. Reframe that. Nobody gets through an amazing experience in life without deep, rich, heavy challenge. And so when those come, I want to be better than being unprepared for them. And so I also know the gold dust of that is that I get to live more richly in the present moment on my way to them. So yeah, as best as we can. Authentic also means keeping it real.
That's amazing. Let's, out of respect for your time and other people's times, let's wrap this one, but this will be part one, man. I didn't know you were so smart. Brother. I didn't know you were so smart, man. I'd had you on.
You know what? Bells and whistles and fog machines all in the background.
It's all Photoshop, and you're actually like AI, and there's like 5 people behind you making you talk about that. Dude, the book's coming out July 9th. I'm going to, what is it, the 6th today? I'm going to release this on Wednesday. I'm going to push you ahead of a bunch of people to help with the book. Because I think it's fantastic. And I'm super, super excited about the book you're doing for the Warrior's Edge stuff.
No, that's a course. That's an online course. Totally free for all first responders.
Excellent.
Your people, man. Let's go.
What's the best way for people to reach you or learn more about you? And I'll put those links in there, but
I'm having fun on social. So all the handles on social, Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn, is at Michael Gervais, Gervais. And the 2 best website places to find me is competetocreate.net. And that's where the courses are held. And then the other for the podcast is called Finding Mastery. And that's findingmastery.net.
Badass. Michael Gervais.
Appreciate you.
Dude, thank you so much. Be safe.
You too. Appreciate you, brother.